The Hand of Glory. One evening between the years 1790 and 1800, a traveler, dressed in woman's clothes, arrived at the Old Spittal Inn, the place where the mail coach changed horses, in High Spittal, on Bowes Moor. The traveler pleaded to stay the night, but promised to leave so early in the morning that, if a quick breakfast was prepared in advance, the family wouldn't need to be bothered when she left. The people of the house, however, arranged that a servant maid should sit up till the stranger was out of the premises, and then went to bed themselves. The girl lay down for a nap on the couch by the fire, but before she shut her eyes, she took a good look at the traveler. They were sitting on the opposite side of the hearth, and espied a pair of men's trousers peeping out from under the gown. All inclination for sleep was now gone. With great self-command, she pretended, closed her eyes, and even began to snore. The traveler took out a dead man's hand from his pocket, attached a candle to it, lit the candle, and waved it several times in front of the servant girl's face. As he did this, he chanted, "Let those who are asleep stay asleep, and let those who are awake stay awake." This done, he placed the light on the table, opened the outer door, went down 2 or 3 of the steps which led from the house to the road, and began to whistle for his companions. The girl, who had the presence of mind enough to remain perfectly quiet, now jumped up, rushed behind the ruffian, and pushed him down the steps. She then shut the door, locked it, and ran upstairs to try and wake the family, but without success. Calling, shouting, and shaking were alike in vain. The poor girl was in despair, for she heard the traveler and his comrades outside the house. So she ran down again, seized a bowl of skimmed milk, and threw it over the hand and candle, after which she went upstairs again, and awoke the sleepers without any difficulty. The landlord's son went to the window, and asked the men outside what they wanted. They answered that if the dead man's hand were but given them, they would go away quietly, and do no harm to anyone. This he refused and fired among them, and the shot must have taken effect, for in the morning stains of blood were traced to a considerable distance. These events were told to my source, Mr. Charles Westell, in the spring of 1861 by an elderly woman named Bella Parkin. She lived near High Spittal and was, in fact, the daughter of the brave servant girl involved in the story. It's fascinating to compare this tale with the following account, shared with me by Reverend S. Baring-Gould. 2 magicians, intending to rob a public house, asked to spend the night by the fire and were granted permission. When the house fell quiet, the servant girl, suspicious of their intentions, crept downstairs and peeked through the keyhole. She saw the men take a dry, withered hand out of a sack. They smeared its fingers with an ointment and lit them like candles. Each finger burned brightly, except the thumb. The thumb wouldn't light because one member of the household was still awake. The girl hastened to her master, but found it impossible to arouse him. She tried every other sleeper, but could not break the charmed sleep. At last, stealing down into the kitchen, while the thieves were busy over her master's strong box, she secured the hand, blew out the flames, and at once the whole household was aroused. But the next story bears a closer resemblance to the Stainmore narrative. One dark night, when all was shut up, there came a tap at the door of a lone inn in the middle of a barren moor. The door was opened, and there stood without, shivering and shaking, a poor beggar, his rags soaked with rain, and his hands white with cold. He asked piteously for a lodging, and it was cheerfully granted him. There was not a spare bed in the house, but he could lie on the mat before the kitchen fire and welcome. So this was settled, and everyone in the house went to bed except the cook, who from the back kitchen could see into the large room through a pane of glass let into the door. She watched the beggar and saw him, as soon as he was left alone, draw himself up from the floor, seat himself at the table, extract from his pocket a brown withered human hand, and set it upright in the candlestick. He then anointed the fingers, and applying a match to them, they began to flame. Filled with horror, the cook rushed up the back stairs, and endeavored to arouse her master and the men of the house. But all was in vain. They slept a charmed sleep. So in despair she hastened down again, and placed herself at her post of observation. She saw the fingers of the hand flaming, but the thumb remained unlighted, because one inmate of the house was awake. The beggar was busy collecting the valuables around him into a large sack, and having taken all he cared for in the large room, he entered another. On this, the woman ran in, and seizing the light, tried to extinguish the flames. But this was not so easy. She blew at them, but they burnt on as before. She poured the dregs of a beer jug over them, but they blazed up the brighter. As a last resource, she caught up a jug of milk and dashed it over the 4 lambent flames, and they died out at once, tittering a loud cry. She rushed to the door of the apartment the beggar had entered and locked it. The whole family was aroused, and the thief easily secured and hanged. This tale is told in Northumberland.